All right, so just quick before we get started on this, just a quick reminder: your paper introductions are due Friday at midnight. Okay. The introduction assignment for the paper that we talked about last week. It's on Classroom. There's a Dropbox on Classroom available. So just as a reminder, that is due next week. Yes, sir. Yes, due this week. The rubric is on Classroom. I will print it out for people who, but the rubric is on Classroom. It's on the assignment as well. So if you click on the assignment, it will have a rubric, 4 criteria, 100 points on there, and then we'll have a video on how to write an introduction to your paper. If you have any questions beyond this, I'm happy to answer them. Yes, David, I'll print you out an extra rubric. All right. Any questions on that assignment? Any ways, any direction I can give you, any help? All right. Today, we will be talking about piracy during the colonial period. All right. Now, piracy has a big part to play in the colonial period, and it's not in the textbook, and I don't really know why. Because it does play a huge, especially huge role on the military and the defensive postures of all of the different countries that are involved in colonialism. And it also plays an important role on trade, and especially smuggling in the colonial lands. So, piracy is something that comes up by accident. It's not intended, but at first it becomes something that is, it has a point. There's a reason why why kings and queens actually allow piracy to start, but then it gets out of hand. So then they have to do a lot to kind of get control of it again. Now, before we get too deep into this, I do want to tell you we don't have very many primary sources on pirates outside of newspaper accounts and other things like that. This is actually one of the few sources we have on pirates. It's called The General History of Pirates. It is by a guy named Captain Charles Johnson. Now, we don't think Charles Johnson's even this guy's real name. So this is not, we don't even know if this is a real person or not. But this is a guy who sat down just after the age of piracy came to an end and wrote down everything he knew about the pirates who were there. So it's a general who's who of the important pirates. It's got Blackbeard in it. It's got Stede Bonnet. It's got, let's see, it's got Charles Vane, Edward England, Stede Bonnet, Teach, Henry Avery, Bartholomew Roberts. You know, all the pirates you've heard of them because they were mentioned in this book. All right, so this is one of the few sources we have on piracy outside of just, primary accounts, some guy writing to his buddy saying, hey, we were attacked by pirates, this guy did this, and this, and then we also have a few newspaper clippings, and that's it. Piracy was obviously something that was highly legal, and it would have been absolutely terrifying to be attacked by pirates. We see them as kind of a romantic figure, Pirates of the Caribbean, Captain Jack Sparrow, all those guys. But these are criminals who would kill you very quickly. Just so everybody is clear on this. So, all of this starts, so kind of setting the stage for piracy. The colonies, just as a reminder, were intended to be money-making ventures. So that is the purpose of what they were supposed to do. In America, competition for economic superiority prevailed. So in Virginia, they start producing tobacco. Virginia tobacco becomes very popular. So in order to keep up with the Virginia tobacco market, the Spanish actually are producing tobacco as well. They start lacing their tobacco with sugar to try and make it taste better for international markets. They're producing rice in South Carolina, but the Spanish want to produce rice as well. So there's a competition for all of these markets. Remember, mercantilism is still strong. Everybody wants their piece of the pie to be bigger than everybody else's. So that's going to lead to competition and short-sightedness, which in turn leads to piracy, which becomes everybody's problem after a while. So in Spain, you had things like South American gold. You had indigenous slaves and Caribbean sugar. Rum was actually a byproduct of sugar, and it would have been very valuable. So this is, you would hear of like, pirates drinking rum. That's actually not what they did. They usually had cheaper spirits. You want to trade the rum and make money off it because it's expensive. In France produced sugar and coffee. So right there's some immediate competition between France and Spain. England produced Virginia tobacco, Carolinian rice, and they produced slaves. Up north, they also produced New England furs. The Netherlands produced sugar and slaves. So everybody is in the slave trade, pretty much. So there's competition there for that. But you also have a lot of people who are involved in the sugar markets as well. So sugar is one of those things that everybody's trying to compete with. So there's this international competition for who can have the best sugar, who has the best, who can corner the market in, furs, who can corner the market in tobacco. There's all kinds of competition, especially amongst the colonial powers at the time. Now, during the golden age of piracy, there are several hotspots for piracy. It's not just occurring in the Caribbean in that area. Actually, some of the worst cases of piracy are happening in the Indian Ocean. The Mughal Empire, which is it's an empire that just took over India, is incredibly wealthy. There's a lot of gold there. There's a lot of goods that the English are starting to trade with. Now, eventually, the English are going to conquer the Mughal Empire and take over India. But while they're trading, all those trade ships make very, very good targets. On top of that, you have the Caribbean as well. Right here around where the slave trade is happening, on the coast of West Africa, there's a hot spot of piracy. Madagascar on the east coast of Africa is another issue. Mediterranean, really it's happening all over the world. Right? It's not just happening in the Caribbean, although the Caribbean is a major hotspot during the golden age of piracy. Now, some of the more famous earlier pirates, guys like Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart, anyone ever heard of him? No? Maybe? No, maybe not. He's featured in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. He's also in a couple video games, but I'll get into talk about him later. William Kidd, anybody knows who that is? Captain Kidd? No? Maybe? Okay. Henry Avery, which is the first major pirate. All of those guys operated here, not in the Caribbean. So Black Bart never was in the Caribbean. He made his base in Madagascar and sailed over here to the Indian Ocean off the coast of India. So did Henry Avery. We'll talk about him in a minute. And Captain Kidd. Now, in the Mediterranean Sea was also a hot spot of piracy at the time. And in the Mediterranean Sea, it wasn't European pirates, it was Arabic pirates. So these guys were all operating off the coast of North Africa, which collectively was called the Barbary Coast. So this is a map of the Barbary Coast of North Africa, what is now places like Tunisia, places like Morocco, northern Libya, parts of Egypt were all part of the Mughal Empire. Not Mughal Empire, the Barbary Coast, sorry, coffee hasn't kicked in. And what this is a collection of independent sultanates. So these guys are Muslim Arab pirates who are operating out of these independent states, each under the control of their own sultan. And they are coming out off the coast of West Africa, and they're actually attacking places, the trade that's going around between France, Spain, Italy, Greece, and what is now Turkey, and the Ottoman Empire. And these guys are attacking any kind of European merchant shipping. And they're taking slaves, and they are especially Christian slaves. And they are taking all the trade goods and then reselling them in the Middle East. So one of the most famous pirates, and you guys have heard of this guy, is Captain Barbarossa. And that's what he actually looked like in reality, right? He was Barbarossa was actually a Barbary pirate, not a European pirate at all. Yep. He was also nicknamed Redbeard because he was a ginger. All right. Now, so piracy is becoming a problem all over the world. And as a result, European navies are having to protect all of their merchant shipping all over the world. All right? England has a big navy. France has a big navy at this time. But those navies are having to be spread all throughout the world, spreading them thin. So there are big, when you have to spread ships all over the world, big gaps start to form. And pirates, especially in the Caribbean, are going to take advantage of those big gaps. So we have global navies enforcing trade, protecting those trade routes in India, in the Mediterranean, in Caribbean, all over the world. But this spreads them thin. It spreads them out. To fill the gap, kings and queens started issuing things called letters of marque. And it's spelled mark like marquis, but it's pronounced mark. And these are issued to people, especially during wartime. Here's an example of one. I believe this is William Kidd's letter of marque, particular. Basically, what's happening is if we don't have a large enough navy to protect an area or to even attack our enemies, because our main navy is going to be protecting all the trade routes. If we're at war, we need somebody to attack the other guy. So they issue these letters of marque to essentially commission these guys as for-hire naval ships. So essentially, pirates were at the start of the golden age of piracy. They were mercenaries, people with wealth, with a lot of wealth, who would fund a ship, fund a crew, and then go out and attack whoever the enemy of the country you're living in is at the time. But when the war ended, the pirates ran out of work to do. And you have a crew of primarily young men who know nothing but maritime war. When the war ends, they're going to do what they just know how to do, which is continue to conduct maritime war. But there's no war anymore, so they just attack everybody. So pirates developed. So most of the time, pirates were people who were already trained sailors. They were people who were either out of work privateers because the wars had ended, or these guys were just merchants trying to make a little bit extra money to make ends meet. Merchants were armed. They weren't armed heavily, but they were armed enough to get the job done. So sometimes a pirate would be somebody who just takes advantage of an opportunity to attack and exploit, and then they're done. And that was just that one time. Pirates essentially became their own seagoing country when this did happen. So one of the earliest forms of European democracy is actually going to be pirates. Most pirates actually elected their captains. They held votes to see if they were going to attack somebody, if they were going to divide the plunder. Are we going to maroon this dude? Are we going to do other things like do we need to stop and get more provisions? So pirates started off, even at the very beginning, they started off as kind of, you know what the term anti-heroes mean? You guys know what that means? Okay, if you read comic books, you definitely know what that means. They are guys that, they're bad, all right? These guys are criminals. Make no mistake about it. But they are conducting some of the very first European experiments in democracy at the same time these ideas are coming to philosophers like John Locke. All right? So pirates have this era of romance just right off the bat, that is kind of what elevates them above, Somali pirates like today. Now, piracy, especially the golden age of piracy, is going to happen because of a series of wars in Europe and in North America, extended North America. So, starting in 1680, we have something called King William's War. All these wars are over like who the next king is going to be, who's going to be the next king of Austria, who's going to be the next king of Spain. So these are all wars of secession. Remember, we have the Habsburg family, who is inbred. A lot of them are starting to die because they have autoimmune disorders or something like that. And so when they die, they're not able to produce heirs. There's going to be a fight over who the next guy in charge of what X amount of country, whatever it is. So we have a series of wars of secession, starting in the 1690s and going all the way up into the 1760s. The French and Indian War is going to be one of those major European wars that happened. But the two main ones that happened during the Golden Age of piracy are King William's War and Queen Anne's War. And these coincide with huge boons, I guess, huge populations of pirates happening during these wars and after these wars come to an end. And this is also happening because in Europe there's a war. The main navy and the main army of the countries that are all belligerents are going to be too busy worrying about what's going on over in Europe in this war, and they're not going to pay much attention to what happens in North America. So things are going to get a little lawless, which allows piracy to happen. So the two main ones for this period are King William's War and Queen Anne's War. We'll talk about both. This one, this is just a quick video on the War of Spanish Succession. This kind of explains why some of these wars are happening. War of Spanish Succession is also called King William's War. It happens right around the same time as really as the Yamasee War. So this is happening while the Tuscarora War and the Yamasee War are going on. Is it gonna play? Maybe. Oh, hit play.
The House of Habsburg, one of Europe's most influential royal families, ruled over various European territories and kingdoms for over 600 years. Known for their practice of inbreeding, particularly through frequent intermarriages within the family to maintain their power, wealth, and territories, this strategy led to a decline in the family's genetic health over generations. The death of Charles II of Spain in 1700, whose severe physical and mental health issues rendered him impotent and unable to produce an heir, would trigger the War of the Spanish Succession. France and Spain supported Philip of Anjou, while Austria, the Dutch Republic, and Great Britain backed his rival Archduke Charles of Austria. Philip would prevail after renouncing any claim to the French throne, forever changing the landscape of European politics.
Okay, so that's just a quick video on the War of Spanish Succession. This is one of the conflicts that are happening. It's happening because Habsburg is starting to die of layers. Okay? It's triggering a war of who's going to be the next king of Spain, who's going to be the next king of France, whatever, right? And when that happens, go ahead. England gets involved. And when England gets involved, their navy gets pulled back to Europe, and then there are gaps in the regular security protocols and trade that pirates exploit. Now, on top of that, you also have outside colonial powers, and you can think of these guys essentially as paramilitary organizations. These are trading companies, all right, that are not just corporations. So this is like these are the first forms of corporations, but they're not just that. They also have their own personal militaries, and some of these personal militaries are just as big as the military the country has. So if the like East India Trading Company went to war with England, it would actually be a good fight because they both have a lot of troops and a lot of power. So you have these trading companies that are essentially their own little nations that are gallivanting around the Caribbean doing what they want to do. A couple of them you've probably heard of. This is like East India Company. Everybody's probably heard of that one. You also have the Dutch West India Company. And there's an English West India Company as well. I mean, what they're doing is they are the merchant. These are these corporations that operate merchant vessels, but they also operate naval vessels to protect those merchants, all in-house. And again, that frees up the governmental nation to be able to use their navy elsewhere. But by giving that corporation the power of the military, you're empowering the nation to make their own global decisions. Or you're empowering the company to make their own global decisions. And so what's happening here, a lot of these corporations, these trading companies, are corrupt. So a lot of the colonial powers in American and Caribbean colonies were corrupt, underfunded, and undersecured. A lot of these companies were also corrupt, but they had a lot of power. So a lot of times, these companies would kind of take in to fill the void of law enforcement, which is way outside of what they're supposed to be doing. And in order to kind of prevent this corruption and these colonial governments from happening, there's a lot of it happening, a lot of countries are going to set up monopolies based on these companies. Okay, so East India Company was established by England to have a monopoly over all of the trade, the British trade in the East Indies, which would be the Caribbean, for example. The West India Company of England would have been trading in the West Indies, Indonesia, for example. But they are the sole company that has that power. So they have a lot, so they're a monopoly. This is a trading monopoly. No. By the way, has anyone ever heard of the Hudson Bay Company? Okay, it's still a clothing manufacturer today. They were a British company established in Canada exclusively to trade in furs. So this is one of the few companies that still exist from this period is the Hudson Bay Company out of Canada. So yeah, these companies are designed specifically to create trading monopolies that the government can oversee in order to ensure that there's no corruption happening. All right? But these companies end up becoming corrupt on their own. They build powerful militaries on their own, and we have a problem. So, yeah, these are British, French, Dutch, Spanish officials. They're authorizing joint stock companies to trade and enforce trade law in these regions. What they did was up to them, and now these companies are just as corrupt. And we have things like in England, the British East India Company, Barcelona Company, etc. So these huge trading companies are filling the gap that the nations are leaving open, but it's allowing them to kind of do what they want, which leads to corruption and problems. Now, one of the first pirates, among the first pirates actually exist. There's a group called the Buccaneers, and Buccaneers is actually a French term. It means, I think, meat traders or something like that. But Buccaneers were privateers who were a part of those early, Spanish and English and French wars that are all being fought around the same time that Jamestown was being settled, and these guys are involved somewhat in the English Civil War as well. So these guys are essentially building up that gap and filling that void as privateers, and then when the wars end, they become their own thing. Now, among the first Buccaneers, the most famous one was Henry Morgan. Has anyone ever heard of Henry Morgan? No?
No, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Thought y'all would know a little bit more of the pirate lore. So that's all right. So the most famous of them was Henry Morgan, and he was famous because he attacked a lot of Spanish strongholds. Henry Morgan actually attacked Havana, Cuba, so after he attacked Havana, Cuba, he was elected the king of the privateers and retired kind of a wealthy guy. So, he helped, there's a picture of Henry Morgan, he helped build the myth of piracy as a way to make, a decent amount of money. When you sack an entire major city of the enemy, that's gonna help. Now the first real pirate to ever sail was a guy by the name of Henry Avery. And Henry Avery kind of falls into this on accident. It's not intended. But he is the first real pirate. So this guy, he's a buccaneer, and he is involved as a privateer in these wars, and they just start attacking a few other ships. But this guy is the first true pirate. Henry Avery and his men attacked a Mughal trading ship. As the story goes, it was a little bit. Some historians are guessing if this was something that he intended to do or not. Were they intending to do this or not? But he attacked a Mughal Empire trading vessel and actually raked in one of the biggest pirate hulls in history out of this. So that ship that Henry Avery attacked was loaded with gold, loaded with spices, loaded with trade goods that he went and sold and made what today would be billions of dollars off of. And again, this is one of those first big hauls that really started attracting people to do something like this. Now the British responded in that attack because this at the time the Mughal Empire was allied with the British. So for Henry Avery to attack this allied ship was a crime. And the British actually started the world's first international manhunt to try and catch Henry Avery. Anyone care to guess? Did it succeed? No. Avery escaped. Avery escaped this international British manhunt. This is the first major manhunt to be conducted on an international scale. And he escapes. We don't really know where he went. Some guesses he probably ended up in Africa somewhere. But he was wanted by the British for the rest of his life. But he got away with millions of dollars. So this guy was labeled by the newspapers as the Pirate King. So Henry Avery getting away with all those millions of dollars was very successful. Now the next major pirate note is William Kidd. William Kidd is born a Scottish pirate. There's actually a couple sea shanties about Captain Kidd, but he was a Scottish privateer, again, operating in the Indian Ocean. There's a painting of him. Now Kidd grew up wealthy. He had enough money to hire a crew and buy a ship or outfit a merchant vessel, and he was hired as a privateer to attack Spanish and French vessels, again, attempting to trade off the Mughal Empire. At the time, England wanted to be the sole traders of Indian spices. So, William Kidd was hired to try and keep the French and the Spanish away from those Mughal Empire trading companies. So he was hired as a privateer originally. Now Kidd set out to be a pirate hunter. And so his job was to protect the English trading vessels from the Spanish and French incursions, and also prevent other Spanish privateers from attacking. So he set out to be a pirate hunter, but he was not a good captain. And when they started setting sail, he and his men ran out of morale very quickly. And if you run out of morale very quickly, that can be a death sentence for the captain. So Kidd did the best thing he could. He decided to attack a random vessel called the Quedagh Merchant. Now, this was an Indian-owned ship flying American colors, so it would have been a colonial flagged vessel flying, but it was an Indian-owned ship, which that's a problem. And it was captained by an Englishman. That's a problem. So because the ship had an American flag, the American colors were one of those that were not protected. So that would have been fair game by William Kidd. That would have been considered a pirate. But there's some messaging because it's an Indian-owned vessel and it's captained by an Englishman. And that's what got him in trouble. So William Kidd attacked the Quedagh merchant, successfully got the gold, got all the spices, and he was getting ready to sell it back. But got him in a lot of trouble. So this prize, along with Kidd's murder of William Moore, so Kidd murdered his first mate out of anger during this desperate low morale time. That was enough to get him to be in a lot of trouble. So Kidd realizes that he's gotten in trouble, and he has some debtors in Boston that he needs to pay back, and he tries to go back and pay off his debtors, and that doesn't end very well because Captain Kidd is captured. And Boston Kidd's backers, which by the way includes the governor of Massachusetts, remember corruption is a thing at the time, branded him a pirate, and he was forced to run to the West Indies. So because of all this mixed messaging, he attacks somebody he's not supposed to, and then he gets in trouble with the law, tries to go back to America, and gets in trouble with the corrupt governor there. And then he just runs. He goes to the West Indies. But he is captured in 1699 by Massachusetts authorities that chase him down to the West Indies. And he's captured on a ship called the Adventure Galley. There's a picture of it. And he was eventually hung by authorities in London. Once he was hung, his body was placed on the gibbet. That's what that thing is. And yeah. Now, before he was captured, this is the only pirate to actually bury treasure, so that was a real thing. Before he was captured, Kidd buried treasure on Governor's Island outside of Boston. And this started the myth that pirates bury treasure. He was the only one to do that. Typically, and I have some books having to do with the archaeology of piracy on my shelf. Here's an example of one. One of the indicators that a ship is a pirate vessel, when we find something archaeologically, is that they do not have gold on them. Anybody care to guess why a pirate ship would not have gold on it?
We sell it.
Well, they don't sell it. They sell the goods they capture. And then what happens to the money? They spend it. They spend it very quickly. So, one of the things we found that confirms like Blackbeard's ship was Blackbeard's ship is medicine was on it. Mercury, to be specific, which was used as a treatment for syphilis, and the lack of gold was another reason why we think that was Blackbeard's ship that we have the artifacts for over at ECU. Which is why ECU was the Pirates, because Blackbeard operated in North Carolina. At least I just admit. But William Kidd, was one of the few pirates that actually buried his treasure, which would have been counterintuitive to pirates because they spent it all very quickly. So Kidd is the only pirate to ever have actually buried their treasure. It was very common that did not happen. But Kidd is the first pirate. He was kind of an accidental pirate, but he was the first pirate that actually something bad happened to. And so that's going to become part of the pirate lore as well. Now, one of the things that the royal government decided to do, because of all this piracy going on, and the wars coming to an end, piracy would have been started to become a problem around this time in history, right around the 1780s, 1790s. the King George I, actually one of the first kings of the 18th century, issues a pardon to all pirates, with the exception of Henry Avery and Williamson. Again, those guys are the pirate kings, and you don't want to pardon them because they made a fool of the British government. So, one of the first times that pirates in the 18th century, as soon as they started getting real bad, they started attacking English trade goods, and King George I decides to try and stop piracy with a carrot. So on September 5th, 1717, a pardon was issued by the king for any pirate to turn themselves in to the closest British authority. Now this pardon was valid until September 6th, 1718. So there was a time period in history where pirates could turn themselves in for and get pardoned. And a lot of these pirates that did do this would become pirate hunters. Bless you. So there was also, on top of this, pardon that the King George I issued was a 200-pound bounty, and 200 pounds is, I think, about $3,000 today, for each pirate captured. So if you turn yourself in, boys, if you turn yourself in and gave and brought some guys with you, then you would get 200 per head, 200 pounds per head. So that's a way, again, to make money very quickly, right? Piracy is all about making money quickly and then spending it quickly. So this incentive worked for a lot of pirates. Most notably, Benjamin Hornigold, who is one of those that people haven't heard much of, but he's still a very important pirate. So Benjamin Hornigold turned himself into governor and privateer of Port Royal, Jamaica, Governor Woodes Rogers. And Hornigold became one of the first pirates of the second kind of golden age of piracy. Here is a picture of him from Charles Johnson's book. And again, a lot of these are some of the only references we have for these guys. So this is the best guess as to what he actually looked like that we have. There's no other images of him. But Hornigold was an infamous pirate, and this guy was not a nice guy. All right. At one point, there's one story that Captain Johnson talks about where he just attacks a group of a ship for the hats. So he had according to the story, they had been out sailing the previous night and they lost their hats, and so he just attacked the closest ship he could find just for the crew's hats, and he killed everybody on the crew for their hats. He was also mentioned. He also mentored, as mentioned as a mentor for many famous pirates, including Sam Bellamy and Ed Teach. Anybody care to guess who Ed Teach? Blackbeard, yes, Blackbeard. So this guy operates during the Queen Anne's War, which is the second war around 1717, 1720, and comes to an end in 1720. This guy is the guy that is mentoring a lot of the other famous pirates, and he later turns and accepts that pardon. So Hornigold later accepted the pardon and became an infamous pirate hunter under the command of Woodes Rogers. So a lot of these pirates are going to, again, it's all about making money. They're trying to do what they can to make as much money as they can. Before they're at this point, they realize they're inevitably either going to retire wealthy or die. So, the next pirate that's worth mentioning is a guy by the name of Edward Thatch, or Ed Teach. We don't know his actual name. And that's his flag over there hanging on my wall, by the way. So Blackbeard, we do know his nickname, which is Blackbeard. And again, this is a picture of him from Captain Johnson's book. And this is the only image we have of him from the time period. So best guess, this is what Blackbeard looked like. Blackbeard, so we don't actually know his name. We know he's from England, but that's about it. His name is Edward. The closest name we have for him is Ed Thatch or Ed Teach. Again, we don't know what his last name actually was, and this probably wasn't even his real name. It's probably just a name he picked up over time. So we don't know who this individual is, and without that, all we have is the primary sources that are linked to his actual information as Blackbeard. We do know a few things though. First off, he was a privateer in Queen Anne's War, which is one of those wars of secession. Head up, foot off. One of those wars of secession
Don't run on camera.
that happened during the 1700s and 1720s. And so he started off as a crewman aboard a privateer vessel fighting in Queen Anne's War, and he later turned pirate under Benjamin Hornigold. Benjamin Hornigold attacked his ship. They made it a whole thing out of asking crewmen of a captured vessel if they wanted to join the crew. Blackbeard did. And so around 1716, Blackbeard starts working on, he starts his career of piracy. Now Blackbeard went up the ranks and eventually given charge of his own ship, not the Queen Anne's Revenge, not yet. He quickly captured multiple ships and made a name for himself. And this guy operated mostly out of fear. Again, so pirates were small vessels, typically. Pirates typically did not want to start a war, start a battle, especially with a bigger ship, because pirates were light vessels. They were underarmed, they were undermanned, and a lot of times they were underfed. So if you wanted to avoid a fight, the best thing to do would have been scare the other group. So the best thing to do would be to try and get them to surrender before the fight even starts. Blackbeard, according to the sources, was an expert at this, which made him so successful. So there's questions that historians have as to, was this guy really a terrible killer, or did he just appear to be one in the records and scare everybody he talked to? We do have records that he killed people, but was he this terrible, infamous pirate that everybody thought he was? One of the most famous things that Blackbeard did is in the 18th century, Blackbeard decided to capture Charleston Harbor. And so Blackbeard successfully blockades Charleston Harbor with a couple of ships. And he does this for medicine. All right, this is not for gold. It's not for rum or whatever. It's for medicine. His men are sick. He is probably too. So they blockade Charleston Harbor looking for mercury, which was an antiviral. Used as antiviral at the time. What they didn't know is it killed everything else off too. Now, Blackbeard successfully got that medicine and then sails to North Carolina. Here, in North Carolina. North Carolina was incredibly, remember, we talked about it being the frontier, where there was not much colonial control over what was going on. So the governor of North Carolina could do what he wanted to do, pretty much. And so Blackbeard sails to North Carolina, and he surrenders, quote unquote, to the governor of North Carolina, who is probably also incredibly corrupt. Charles Eden was his name. And he spent some time in Bath. So Blackbeard stays in Bath. In Bath, there is a house right here that Blackbeard supposedly lived at least this is a reconstruction of it. So it's not some beautiful mansion, it's just a regular run-of-the-mill house in the time period. Oh, and by the way, by this time he did have the Queen Anne's Revenge, and this is probably our best guess as to what it actually looked like. Has anyone ever been to the Queen Anne's Revenge lab? Okay. Jordan, you have?
went last year.
You went there last year? Okay. So right outside of town is an archaeological conservation lab that's run by ECU in conjunction with the North Carolina State Department of Cultural Resources. Its job is to preserve artifacts from a shipwreck that we believe is the Queen Anne's Revenge. They have cannons there. They have part of the anchor that's there. They have part of some of the rigging, some of the dead eyes, which would have been those little wooden things that you put the ropes through. We also found evidence of mercury medical instruments that would have had mercury in them. Again, we found a lack of gold. All of that points to a pirate vessel. The only pirate vessel known to be scuttled off the coast of North Carolina was the Queen Anne's Revenge. So we do believe that that was the Queen Anne's Revenge, and that's where most people believe it was. There are a few people who debated that. Had professors, some professors believed it was, some of them didn't. But Blackbeard surrenders into the king's pardon, spends the time in Bath, and but he gets bored. And by 1718, Blackbeard begins operating as a pirate again. And so he operates off the coast of North Carolina. And again, Charles Eden, the governor of North Carolina, is probably corrupt, probably getting some money from Blackbeard's ventures. So North Carolina, and they're also, at the same time, fighting the Tuscarora and Yamasee Wars. So North Carolina is not really interested in helping police the coast. So the governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood, is the guy who sends a flotilla out to take care of Blackbeard. It's under the command of a guy by the name of Captain Robert Maynard. And they intercept Blackbeard off of Ocracoke, and he is killed at sea. As the story goes, he's shot a few times, he has been beheaded, and his body swims around the ship a few times. That's probably not true. Now, he is beheaded. There are plenty of records that indicate that. It's part of the official reports. Although, you may see somebody who has Blackbeard's skull. There's no way of confirming that. We don't know where it is. But that's the end of Blackbeard. Another famous pirate from the time period is actually a alias. He's actually one of this is the last guy we'll talk about. But he is one of the mentees of Blackbeard. His name is Stede Bonnet. Stede Bonnet was a planter in Barbados in his life. So he started his life as a wealthy planter. He is a member of the gentry. He has college education. So he's got this reputation as being kind of a gentleman. Now, why he turns to piracy after living such a good life? I mean, he's wealthy. He doesn't need the money. But some people say he's got a mental disorder. Especially the people that lived around him say he's got a mental disorder. Probably something like bipolar disorder. And so, which mood swings. He can be incredibly violent at times. He probably had this thirst for adventure that sent him on the same track as piracy. Now, he was a planter, and all planters at the time had ships they could trade their goods with across the Caribbean. So, Stede Bonnet captained a sloop, which is a small, medium-sized vessel, with 10 guns and 70 men, which is enough to do some damage. Now, he cruises off the coast of Virginia. He decides to go up into the actual colonies, away from the main Caribbean. So he cruises off the coast of Virginia, New York, spent some time in North Carolina as well. And then, while his ship was under repair. And then he is captured off the coast of Charleston in 1718. This is just after the Yamasee War. It happened. And eventually he's hung where Battery Park stands today. And today, if you go to the Battery Park in Charleston, there's a slab. This is a picture that I took 2 years ago. There's a slab that has the marks location where he was hung. So you can actually go to Charleston and see where he was hung. Now, that's where we'll leave off for today. We'll finish piracy tomorrow, the next class, Wednesday. And then we need to talk about inoculation controversy that happens. Any questions? All right.